Welcome to GreenKite to Ask the Experts. In this podcast series, we cut through the jargon and we try and get straight to what really matters in our industry. So if you are having issues, you're navigating tricky changes, then you're in the right place. Come listen to us and we'll help you tackle those questions in insurance, one episode at a time. Welcome to today's podcast. Sara, Ager here, and in our series of delegation and concentrating on delegated authority, we're going to delve into some of the intricacies of the business process, how it's changing in the London market, and explore some of the themes and points of interest that are shaping a critical aspect and a growing area in the London market. And I'm delighted, truly delighted to have Helen Donegan around with me today. I'm going to be asking her views on lots of things. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting and or working with Helen, she's got 15 plus years as working in a C-suite position in the London market, in the likes of MS Amlin and Ager. She's currently at Canopius, where she is their COO of the managing agency. And as part of her role of COO, she gets the joy of looking after the delegated authority management part of Syndicate 4444. There's lots of focus in that area in the Lloyd's market generally, but in her organisation and for her team. Helen is also a member of the LMA Operations Committee, which she attends, and the Delegated Authority Committee. So you can see, totally entrenched in the world of delegation. So welcome, Helen. And as I say, really pleased to have you on board today and really looking to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, thank you for having me. As you say, I'm well entrenched in the world of DA, so getting an opportunity to talk about it through a different lens is a nice way to end the year. So very happy to be here.
So let's get straight in then, shall we? So delegation falls within your arena, and there's been lots of changes over the last 18 months in the trading environment, but also the regulatory environment. And I think that has had, well, in my experience, that's had quite a significant impact on what we're required to do. Due diligence and selection of cover holders has always been a key part of any delegated book of business. Historically has fallen to the DUA team, who I think, as I understand it right, in Canopius fall to your responsibility. And so I know the area of due diligence and oversight is getting a lot more focus these days, both by Lloyd's and also by the PRA. Particularly through the lens of consumer duty. Now, I understand that, you have to understand the remit and requirements of consumer duty, but it's more around the impact that's had through the lens of due diligence and what you're required to do now when you select your cover holders that I'm interested for us to highlight today. So how do you think the changes in our trading and regulatory environment have impacted due diligence, and how's it evolving as part of the DA process, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, look, due diligence has always been part and parcel of working with third parties, in particular cover holders. Clearly, if you're trusting in a partnership and giving away your pen to another organisation to write on your behalf, there's a huge amount of assurance that you need that you're partnering with the right people before you start looking at the business outcomes that partnership has generated. I worked in, as you quite rightly said at the beginning, and aged me with the 15 years, but thanks for that, Sara. I've worked in various different places where it's managed in different ways. Here at Canopius, you're absolutely right. The delegated authority team sits in operations. In the past, it sort of sat in underwriting and in claims.
Okay.
For our DCAs, so our delegated claims partners who manage our claims processing for us, or claims authority for us. However, I think there's a distinction where you want to kind of have a bit of a separation of powers with the underwriters or claims handlers, or folks and underwriters here. And it's operational, right? It's making sure that the right things are happening, that you've got the right process in place, that it's auditable, etc. And taking that away from a commercial relationship has got its benefits as well. So you're absolutely correct. It reports in to me, and I've managed it here, and in my immediate job prior to this, it also reported into operations. I think that's sort of the way of...
I was just going to say that seems to be quite a common trend, actually.
Yeah. As I say, for some smaller managing agencies or people who've got one or two, underwriting assistants have done it sort of side of desk. But given the level of requirements that are coming through from regulators and just centrally for us, right, there's more and more focus on making a profit, but doing that in the right way and consistently, and managing a cycle, I think, is something that's definitely become more of kind of the term of term of art and certainly a conversation.
And what I loved, the third word you used when I asked you that question, Helen, was the word partner and partnership. You've emphasised that a lot. And I think due diligence always used to be about, oh, you're going to fail because it's a tick box exercise, but so much more than that now, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've all been to places where, and it's so much easier and enjoyable for people working, right? You know, working in London is an expensive place to do business, expensive place to hire very technical people. You know, no one's inspired by sitting there asking someone to check a CV for the 7th year in a row to see if so-and-so from a CEO in the US is an appropriate person, without there being a so what answer. Like, why are we asking these questions? So the transition from tick box to real risk management is something I've definitely seen, not just here at Canopius, I'm talking more generally across the market, making sure that we really understand what the risks are being posed by that particular relationship, right? So there are lots of areas where there is a huge nuance in what one cover holder is like versus another, what business we do with them, how integrated our systems are, what type of business they're, right? So making sure that we nuance our assurance for things like cyber resilience, consumer duty, you've already mentioned a couple of times, and it's something, you know, I don't think a day goes by where I don't hear the conduct or consumer duty, one of the C's coming through in various meetings. So making sure we really understand what the risk posed is, how we can manage the risk, rather than here's a standard set of 30 questions we ask of everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, look, in part that's got loads of really positive things for a business. But from an ops person, you know, what gets me all hot and bothered is it means we can also have a proper look at the process, right? Once we know that this is the way we want to go through it and this is the way we want to manage things, we can look at efficiencies. You can look at producing MI. You can start to work with underwriters and say, hey, you know, this cover holder is excellent. We've got a really great relationship with them. We renew them with hardly any issues. They attest to everything. Is there a way you want to put a bit more line down on this? Because every pound you're writing on this is not costing us 30p on assurance, whereas cover holder B is a little bit troublesome. And these are the reasons why. And it's indicative, right, of, you know, we've all worked with lots of businesses, Sara, you know, in your business, you're, you know, as a consultancy firm and working across the market and with MGAs. Sometimes you just get a vibe for a business and whether or not it's well set up, well managed.
Yeah.
If it's done all that, usually, not always, everyone can have a bum result, but usually it's an indication that something's going right or very wrong. And it can sometimes be early flags, especially when the market does turn, and I'm sure it will. Unfortunately, at the moment, we'll get our fingers crossed for, we've only got a few more weeks on this year, but let's hope the same for 2025. But when questions start coming around capital and that starts getting restricted, who you want to play with is a massive question. And I think ops and risk and compliance and everybody around it should be part of that, rather than, okay, yeah, we want to write business here and here's a load of no men we've got to get through who sit on the side of a desk and ask, you know, pointless 20.
Well, I think that's all about managing the cycle, like you mentioned, isn't it, Helen? Because it's not just a tick box, because actually, and I think if nothing else, my observation is there's an increasing need because of consumer duty for those function areas to work together. So actually operations can't just do the upfront stuff. They need to be feeding in throughout the term of any binding authority in place. Speaking to the underwriters, talking to the claims, telling them what the data is. I agree, there is something there around gut feel. Gut feel isn't everything, but there is an indication. If the data always arrives late in the wrong format, you know, can't really make head nor tail of it. Sometimes that means that warrants a bit more investigation. It might transpire that there isn't anything untoward, but actually, I think just being a bit more alive and kind of aligned with across the business, so you share that information, allows you to select and manage that good business. Because I think delegated business is good business as long as the management and oversight is there, because you can make margin on it, right? I mean, and that's what we're all in it for.
Yeah, look, if you go back to the reasons that we operate with delegated partners, you operate with them for scale in some instances, for where they've got expertise in areas that you can't get access to.
Yeah.
Be that geography or be that types of business, you learn from them. It means that we can focus on open market or some of the kind of the other risks that we really can add expertise on. I mean, look, if you speak to anybody in any discipline, having more information just makes a better decision, right? And if we are able to collect that information and give a rounded view of a partner, I don't know an underwriter or anybody in management, certainly not here, and I would suggest anybody in any successful business that's going to not look at that.
Yeah.
You know, so I think really when you say what's changed, you know, the move from this is compliance in its worst sense. I certainly don't want to upset my compliance colleagues across the market, but compliance
you mean compliance with a small c rather than compliance
with a small c, and you can take the c and make it another c word if you want to. I'm sure some underwriters have that sort of compliance.
Yeah,
versus real risk management, partnership, and then we can do some really cool from an operations, from a COO perspective, view on processes, really making sure that people have got meaningful and challenging careers. And then, the final piece of this, and, I suspect, given however long we've got on this podcast, there's no way I'm going to get away with not talking about a regulator here or there. We've got to get better at transparency and making sure we document what we're doing with this information. We're collecting information as well. We can't just have it sat around in various folders and not be doing something with it. It's not good for lots of reasons, both kind of from a legal and accountability perspective, but just generally that sort of transparency. The amount of times I've spoken to underwriters or people in DA teams based on this topic, but all across the business, are doing all the right things.
Yeah,
really are. And look, I have worked in this industry probably for more than 15 years now, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of what we do. I think it's a great industry to work in. Demonstrating that in a consistent way and all the good stuff that you do is probably something we're not that great at, I think, as a market.
I think what you've touched on there is about like consistency of information, but using that information in a meaningful way. So if we were to move on from due diligence, like we collect all this information throughout the term, and we all kind of now sign up to and agree that there's something around ongoing oversight and management and kind of early intervention when it's required, and kind of arm's length reporting when that's just as equally required. But I guess that means that the data and the MI or the reporting you have from those partners is even more pivotal, isn't it? Because it plays a really significant role in delegated authority. So if we were to ask, you've touched on reporting and data, what are some of the key requirements? I mean, for me, everyone uses this term data strategy as this really grandiose term, but it's in its simplest form. It's almost like understanding what you need to know and asking your partner to provide that information so you can understand their business and the business that they're writing on your behalf, but in a more kind of detailed way. What's important to you in your role as far as the capture and the utilization of that data, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Data strategies are obviously very important, but really what we should start with is a business strategy, right? Yeah. And then build data around it. I mean, this is not the purpose of this podcast, but we're all, reading things on AI, etc. Yeah. That is a tool to help with business, rather than we need to find an answer on how to use ChatGPT. That's a good point, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could all use that and get the answer for why we don't have our jobs, right?
Hey, it's a great tool. I would love to have bought some shares in it early up front. This is not that moment to sort of cry into my mulled wine later on. But really, it's got to be about what do we want? What are we going to make decisions on? And how are we going to make our process slick, efficient, give people what they need to do the jobs that sit here at our company. So I think really a business strategy that's supported by data is a better way of phrasing it.
Okay, sure.
I would hope so.
Don't disagree. Business don't know what they want, and the data can't show them what they need, right?
I mean, I'm loath to admit, and clearly certainly not where I work currently, never has happened, I'm sure. Yeah, but there are the amount of times people have loaded or implemented technology and it's not been right because it's not been supported by the business, right? Sure. It's been done, and that's no fault of IT or data or anybody. But if you build something in a room and then go, ta-da, here you go, business. Well, that's not, what's that got to do with anything, right? It's not your skill set. So, when we talk about implementation of new technology, and your firm is obviously helping us with some of that at the moment and going into next year, I look forward to continuing to work with you, especially I assume this podcast is suitable in way of payment entirely. I'll reach out.
Well, we can renegotiate on those bases if you want, Helen.
It was worth a try. But look, as we kind of embark on that journey, really, the first thing is to work out what our business process looks like. What exam question are we trying to answer by technology? So having someone from the business, or having people, it would certainly be more than one, from the business working iteratively with IT and data and the vendor and yourselves as the team that are going to support us with that is huge. It's always frustrating because it sometimes seems like it takes a long time in discovery then. Yeah. I think that's something I've seen in projects that have gone well, is you've got to ride that first storm of pressure that comes from everybody saying, well, why isn't it delivered? Why isn't it delivered? That sort of fact-find time at the beginning, my God, is it valuable? Because, you create such a space to kind of get some really great wins early on. So implementation, picking the right tool means the business needs to be involved. Developing the right tool means the business need to be involved. So please, the underwriters who are listening to this across the business, if one of your COOs saddles up to you and asks you to be part of a technological implementation, we are not asking you to code business or code some system or learn how to write gobbledygook that you will never need. What we're asking is, we're not underwriters. I can design something in a room and deliver it, but it won't answer what you're asking.
Yeah.
You need to understand it. So
I think that often causes the disquiet, doesn't it? Because one part of the business is implementing and developing something for another without fully recognizing or having full buy-in or input from the other side of the function, which leaves either or both parties disgruntled to a degree.
Oh my goodness, there's nothing that leaves people more frustrated than, I've got analysts that took us off right into the wee small hours trying to deliver something to then get, well, this is pointless. And the other side, the underwriters in the business being promised, just wait, bear with us, it's coming. And we unveil it and they go, well, what is this? And on top of that, then I've got my boards saying, well, we spent a load of money on something and it's not working. So no one's happy if that's the way it goes. So my first thing on any decision on tech or implementation of tech, meaning kind of the upfront usability for the business, needs the business involvement.
That's a good term, usability. That's a good term.
Look at me at the end of the year, rolling out many big words. Give me a couple more weeks and it'll be lost, I'm sure. So there's a bit around that. I think the other area that we really need to be smarter as a market, firms within the market, and then without touching on Lloyd's too early at this point, but just kind of the whole ecosystem and how things sort of hang together. Streamlining processes, streamlining systems. The amount of times we've got this little bit of tech that's sort of locked into solve one problem versus another. The downstream impact of everything you touch is so hard to untangle. That sort of spaghetti diagram of what systems all link together. There are some big market things that are going on, Blueprint 2, et cetera, that are solving some parts of that. But there's a lot to do in firms, including the one I'm working in at the moment.
I think it's across the market. I wouldn't say your firm are in. No. I think everyone's trying to improve how they do this to make it more scalable.
Yeah, and like back to what we were saying about partnerships with cover holders, it's partnerships with technology firms as well, right? Sure. And then vendors, outsourcers, those sort of people who know this, whose job it is to do this day in, day out.
And I also think that the problem is there's quite a lot of suppliers out there in the market that you can select these tools from. And on the face of it, they all do a pretty good job, actually. It's the implementation and how you make their technology bend and suit the requirements of your business means that it's either successful or a failure. That's my simpleton's view on it.
Yeah, and also things that, look, when we're selecting, or when I have selected tech in my career, I also sort of meet with the management team and look at what their future visions are of where they want to get to. Again, that sort of get the feel of, are these, is there a vision here about how to move this forward? And does that align with you strategically in your business? Mm-hmm. Like you say, some tech is similar to others, and choosing between them can be hard when you're sat sort of there cold with, does it do this, yes or no? But that sort of, can we work with you guys longer term on where we want to get to? Are they asking us the right questions? I've been in tech meetings where they said, well, what's your business plan in 5 years' time? And I remember the first time people asked me, I was like, well, sort of, hold on, that's not what we're here for. And the more I thought about it, I was like, brilliant, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of future-proofing what you're putting in, and you're really entering into it as a partnership. So I think with regard to technology, especially if it's obviously a business piece of tech, that's what we're talking about here, you need to have the business sponsor it, have help with the implementation and design, and then the ongoing management of it. And I think, that partnership and making sure that you're doing it with the right people.
Out of interest, what's your view of the ownership of the tech? So in a business, do you think that should be IT, or do you think that's the function area, or do you think there's joint? I mean, I'm just interested, really.
So we implement, and I believe in both. I think you have to have a tech schedule and an
like a joint ownership almost between those two function areas. Okay.
Yeah. So when you look at version upgrades and things like that, there are some technological considerations, whether or not you want to be on the latest version and SaaS and all that sort of stuff that's very techy. But also you need the business version, business people in that meeting saying, look, this is much more important. If you look at a schedule of things, and we all have this in our business, where you've got you've got an X amount of money to spend during the year, the demands are higher. Understanding what the priority is not just a tech call, right? Understand what the priority is a business call, and so you need everybody around that table to.
And understanding the risks that if you don't have an update, understanding what the risks of the business are, both on the day-to-day running of your business, but also as far as your market positioning, I think is part of the decision, which is a business and a strategic, not an IT or tech decision, is it?
There's also some stuff on just strain on the business, right? Resource strain. I've just said that we need the business to be key stakeholders. If we're doing an upgrade to our pricing model for property, and at the same time I'm looking at property DA assurance, and at the same time we're looking at that from an exposure management perspective, I'm going to get a call from my property class underwriter, right? So there is a part of which you have to look through and kind of as a senior manager within a business work that out, and making decisions in isolation is never a good idea. So my answer is both, and as many people as you can to input into a decision, but then have one or two right at the top. Ruling by consensus is also not the art.
It's like drafting by committee, isn't it?
Impossible. You need point person who sits around a tech committee that is tech, point person that's business, and then lots of information that goes into that decision. But some clarity on roles and responsibilities is absolutely crucial.
And I know that's how you do it at the moment, and I think we've found that quite refreshing, because quite often we find that it's either IT or business owned, and then there is this kind of, well, your priorities are more important than my priorities, and I think by having ownership, it avoids that kind of rivalry almost about money and spend and time.
Yeah, and also look, we're all trying to do the right thing here, and work and deliver a plan and deliver a profit to our shareholders, to the market, etc., depending on the business that you're in. No one's sat there in the tech team or in the underwriting team screaming for something to be updated because it's fun and that they want to be working late in the evening on an extra project as the side of the desk. People feel very passionate about what they do, and I love that as part of our industry. But you just need to pull the veil back and say, look, well, this is where we've come from. This is why we thought this was going to be more important than you. And if they turn around and say, well, hold on a second, actually, no, this is where we want to be focused. Of course, that goes into it should and has here definitely gone into the decision on what gets prioritised.
Good. I mean, that's really helpful. And I guess putting in the right platform and have it configured in the right way, then, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Because that ensures you get the accurate and reliable data. Then the business understand what they know and what they don't know, and then they can actually make the right decisions on that. And I know you didn't want to touch on the regulator, so I'm going to do it for you. But I think Consumer Duty is all about that outcome-focused approach, isn't it? So having that reliable and up-to-date data is increasingly critical. So if you don't have any tech platform that appropriately supports your delegated authority business model, firstly, you're not going to be the partner of choice for the cover holders and MGAs with a profitable business.
Absolutely.
So, that's anti-competitive. And secondly, when you do have them on board, then you won't really understand the business they're writing for you anyway. So then there'll be questions internally about, well, why did you select them and why are we working with them? So I think, there is this whole ecosystem that one self-perpetuates the other almost, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I certainly, this is not weighted because I sit across from regulators all the time, but the questions that they're asking aren't questions that we're not asking of ourselves, or certainly things we shouldn't be asking, right? We all want to provide a fair value product to our end clients, right?
I mean, we never set out to do otherwise, right? It's just unfortunate that sometimes it hasn't been presented correctly or packaged correctly or sold correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, and if you think about those examples where that has not been the case, how many times has that ultimately led to a profitable outcome for a business as well, right? Not just fines and reputation, everything else like that, but the actual business underneath it becomes really problematic, and it sucks up so much time of everybody. We all make missteps. There's always been claims and there's always going to be complaints, etc., etc. How you manage those and having clear processes around it means that you can just get to the answer very quickly. And if something's not working the way you thought it would or thought you designed it, catching that earlier on is a good thing for everybody involved. It's not, oh no, let's get in before the regulators kind of find us. That's absolutely, I don't know any business that wants that to be the case. The bits that are challenging, in particular around consumer duty and conduct, I think for the London market, is things around MI and transparency.
Yeah.
We just haven't coded our business in that way. You know, certainly London market, you'll look at risk codes and, you know, that aligns.
I also think, you know, that whole, the broadening of that definition of, so customer business isn't necessarily consumer business, right?
No,
so we always used to think that consumer business was retail, right? And so personal lines, but actually the definition given to customer is not the same now. So, you know, one-man bands and accountants, small accountancy firms with 1 or 2 partners, you know, they all fall within that definition of customer. So, you know, outcome-based, and arguably, you know, and I know you feel the same, you know, when you're running a process, is it strictly unfair if one process gets dealt, one set of customers get dealt with one way because they fall within the definition of customers, but another set of customers get dealt in a different way because they fall outside the definition. We all don't want that to happen.
Of course not. Of course not. And I think, you know, look, we've got to look at ourselves and our skill sets. Well, in particular in DA, which I know we're talking about here in this podcast. You know, when you are that step removed again from the end client and actually distributing that product, it becomes even more challenging. And this is not a criticism of any London market underwriter, but, you know, we write slips and we understand the technical pieces. You know, has some of those underwriters ever written face to face with a vulnerable customer? No. Right. And so some of the reason that we have these delegated authority arrangements is you're an expert in this area so that we can have access to that business and provide the you know, one, to make money. That's why we're here. You know, we want to be a profitable business, but also we have to provide capital to these markets so that people can get coverage, right? There is a benefit to the world.
I mean, I agree with you. Insurance, and people often forget about the positive sides of insurance. Yeah. Insurance provides a societal need. It allows segments of society, in fact, all society, to run because it manages risk.
Absolutely. You take insurance, you know, we had our interns coming in recently, and, you know, you stand up and do kind of the whole spiel about the company that you work for. But when you take insurance out of the world, the amount of money companies would have to keep on their balance sheet to manage worst case scenario, it would stifle innovation. You know, if anybody's had something horrible happen to them, or something, you know, personally or property, you know, when it's been done right and when you've got that money come in and you know, recovered in the right way, genuinely sometimes it's life-saving, right? Repatriating people, it genuinely is life-saving. It genuinely means that you can, you know, not worry about paying your mortgage when you're very, very unwell. It means that your house has been burnt down, but you're going to be looked after, and ultimately, you
won't be homeless.
Absolutely, right? But in order to all those good things, you have to have a well-managed business that sits underneath it, and the more efficient we can be in that, the quicker that we can find out areas where there's a way to improve things, to make sure that things are fair, and ultimately they're fair to our shareholders as well, or that money goes away. You know, that balance needs to be well struck, and the way to get there is to make things very clear, transparent, and make sure the processes and data mean that we can make the right business decisions, and that's our underwriters and claims.
So if I just take up on one of the points you make about, you know, transparency and availability of data, because we haven't necessarily historically coded our risks the same way as we might choose to now. You know, do you think the London market recognise that and are making strides to address that as part of their challenge?
Well, I hope that is a question for this podcast, not one, you know, because it's one of the things we're talking about at length in the project we're doing. Absolutely, right? And it's not just because the regulators told us to do it. Anyway,
you need to know what you're writing, right?
Completely, right? So any lens you can look through to glean information in a different way from a subset, right? So, you know, the same way you can look at some of the, you know, the big broker sort of portfolio plays like ACT and some of the things that are in the press at the moment we participate on. You know, having data and looking across data, even when you're not experts in certain areas. So if I can look at how our high conduct business is performing slug one, it helps us make business decisions. It allows people to get under the weeds, all the things we've talked about. Ultimately, people love to talk about data and AI and all this sort of stuff, but if you just take it as, if you're going to make a decision in your life, would you prefer to make that in a blind room, or would you prefer to have that with as much sort of stuff written out for you so that you knew and can make an informed decision? And that's what data is. That's all it is. It's just making an informed decision. And if you make an informed decision, over time, you will make a better one. And anything we can do to do that, any way we can put a different lens on it and make sure that we've got timely, reliable clean data that we can get access to quickly in an efficient way. That's not an insurance plea. I think that's in every industry and in your personal life as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Informed decisions invariably are the best decisions.
Of course, they have to be. If not, we're all going home, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if I can just finally kind of ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to share some of your insight sitting on the market committees. I think it would be of interest, definitely, for everyone to know what your views, either the market or your personal views are as far as the future of delegated authority within Lloyd's in particular, and the London market more specifically, if that's possible. Is that something that you feel?
Of course it is, and I'll start this. I worked at Lloyd's, right, as I know you know, Sara. I worked at Lloyd's right at the beginning, sort of my London market career. I was a real pup, so. But I remember working there and how challenging it is for those guys sat centrally. You know, if anybody's listening to this that works in a commercial business, trying to get a project off the ground or a piece of work off the ground with multiple underwriting teams and, you know, your complaints team and finance, if you multiply that by nearly 60 companies plus brokers plus tech visions, I mean, it is a headache I do not envy for anybody sat centrally. So I'll start with that.
Okay.
Only because I'm about to follow up with, I think, to be frank, it's been disappointing. But let's be frank, it's been pretty disappointing, right? I think we'd all hoped we'd be further forward on a DA strategy.
Yeah, I think it would be naive of us, us all, not to say that, right?
Of course. And this comes from Lloyd's, right? They've come out with what they want to be doing for 2025. We've been talking about it at the various committees you mentioned earlier on. You know, there's going to be a real pivot to look at how we can tackle some of the big questions in there. There's a lot of great work going on. So, you know, if you look at some of the big projects around sort of the consolidated binding authority agreements and making sure that we have wordings that are able to sort of be ingested as we move into technology, but ultimately supporting visions of the future with accord messaging and so on and so on. So there is some great work working on the actual contract itself. On the due diligence side, you know, Lloyd's Century are looking again at streamlining compliance. I think that's the name of the actual project, Streamline Compliance. It's kind of links to their old DARE process.
Okay.
Trying to get some more clarity where, you know, for a cover holder, obviously dealing with multiple different companies asking similar but slightly different questions. The balance is really hard to get right because all as individual companies have different risk appetites. We all have our own masters to please, but there are some things that are universal. So working with Lloyd's over 2025 on those sort of base level pieces of information, whether or not we can do that in a more consolidated way, is something I know they're working on and something I really support. So those two kind of big projects, CBAA and the kind of consolidated streamline of compliance to a certain extent, where it doesn't touch on some of the managing agency side and how much risk you're willing to take and where. Getting that balance right is key. I think it's challenging on the bordereau side, in particular. That's been very challenging. There's a huge...
I think, but even just an awareness now that, you know, API is not necessarily the solution for all, at least within our lifetime, you know, and being able to deal with bordereau as well as straight through processing. And
absolutely.
I mean, even that is a step forward, I think, because that comes.
But you know, you've also got to remember some of the systems that we're going to be using for our bordereau and or whatever straight through. Some of that API ability, I love sort of making up words on the spot, but some of that wasn't there in the past. So, you know, you've got to judge people for the decisions they made at the time. Picking a system that was going to be mandated across the market makes a lot more sense then than it does now, where you could have multiple systems that just provide the information in a smart, structured way, and we have ingestion tools and things like that. So, you know, I feel for some of the unique challenges of working in the market and trying to get something standardized, centralized. I think, again, the lessons learned of kind of looking at process first and then putting tech on top, rather than going out quickly with tech solutions.
Well, yeah, I mean, tech's only going to work if the process sits behind it and is supported by the tech, right? We all know that. But I mean, it's a hard lesson that I think everyone's finally heard and learned, maybe.
Yeah, and also, you know, again, touch wood, 24, 25 have been great years for the market, right? So there's more money to invest, put bluntly.
Let's hope it is done then.
Absolutely.
I think most people have the appetite to do it now as well, don't they? They all realise that it needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, when things get really, really tough, we've all, we've been around long enough to know what that feels like. Focus shifts to kind of what has to happen rather than, we've got a bit of space and a bit of time. Let's look strategically about where we want to get to. I think the speed of change now is definitely something that's different than in the past. The speed of tech change, if you don't keep pace, I think boards and the guys with the hands on the purse strings understand now that might save you a point on your expense ratio this year, but trust me, in 3 years' time, you're going to struggle as a business. So I think that balance is much better understood, and Lawyers has been a really good partner in that, in making sure that companies are well aware of the need for investment. Blueprint 2 phase 1, sorry. So it's a great stepping stone to that. Clearly, delays in that project, we all know what they are, but I'll say it here, and it's not just because I'm sure some people will listen to it. That has to happen. We can't run a multi-billion pound market on some of the systems that were built before I was born. And I mean, that's genuinely the state of it. So underestimating how hard it is to, untangle that spaghetti going right the way back to the beginning of this, I think has been a problem for us all. But I think the right people are in the right places now, and they really are tackling it. It will take longer than some hope, but I think the right things are being done.
Well, I mean, I think that's a really positive note to end on, Helen. The future is bright. The future is bright and all that.
Yeah, look, as I say, I've worked in this industry for a very long time. I feel as optimistic as ever about both working in it. I think hopefully it's come across how passionate I am about it, and the people that are
definitely
to work with. But also, I think genuinely,
I think we sometimes forget how incredibly talented most of our peers are. Right? Without exception, we have a really broad skill set that we just take for granted almost.
Honestly, if I look at my career path, I mentor a couple of people, and especially women in insurance, young women that are coming into it, where I started versus where you are now, and the various options that you have, and how your career can develop, and not be sort of siloed so early on. I think we've got such a great opportunity to make people, really empower people to do and be included in bringing their best selves, and that can only mean that we're set up for great things in the future. So yeah, it's not just because it's nearly Christmas, I promise, but I am genuinely very excited about the future here, and looking forward to the project next year that we'll be working on, but more broadly the market and where it can get to now that some of those kind of underlying issues of tech are starting to peel away through the big projects. It means we can make some really smart, sensible, strategic directions for the next 10 to 15 years of the market.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, and also your passion, because it clearly comes across, Helen.
Oh, great.
We're 4 days before the end of the year almost, and you still sound like it should be February. So go you. Amazing job. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your experiences. And we are delighted to be working with you and helping you on all this stuff, and the challenges that we face together will be exciting. So here's to 2025. And as I say, thanks once again for your time today and everything you've told us.
No problem at all. Look, best wishes to 2025.
Thanks for tuning in to Ask the Experts with GreenKite. And we hope that you've gained some valuable insights which help you steer your insurance journey with confidence. Remember that for every complex question, there's always a clear answer just waiting to be unearthed. Join us next time as we continue to decode the intricacies of the insurance world. More expertise on demand? If you need it, then visit our website. Take care, and see you all on the next episode.